do our job from a long distance. The blue collar worker can't stay at home to keep the manufacturing lines open of textile and rubber and cloth that we need in our hospitals right now. The delivery trucks, the grocery stores. The blue collar worker is going, wait a minute, I don't get to stay at home.
Helene Cooper, there's been a lot of chatter about the president ought to appoint, ought to deputize, maybe it's a member of the Joint Chiefs, a general.
Wrong.
Of maybe
Chuck.
Somebody of the status.
The elected person is the person we want in power. Chuck.
Procurement czar here.
There has been a lot of that, and as you know, at the Pentagon, the reason people are saying to do this, to appoint a general, is at the Pentagon, they specialize in planning. That's what they do all the time, and in a wartime situation. It's just been so fascinating, though, Chuck, seeing the American government response to this and just how much we have appeared to lag by a good 10 days to 2 weeks, this virus, with everything that we're doing. The fact that you have the administration, the White House finally coming on and saying that we should be wearing face masks is something that many health officials say should have happened a month ago.
Wrong.
Still don't happen.
That's not what they said.
With that, I think is hugely significant. I'm not sure which kings and queens he thinks are going to be coming to the White House that he needs to be worried about greeting with a face mask on.
That's not what he said. It's voluntary.
Appearance that it won't look good for him to be seen wearing a face mask at a time when you have thousands upon thousands of Americans dying, and so the numbers looking like they're about to go shockingly higher. I think says a lot about leadership in a time of crisis.
Very quickly, Casey.
That's right. Attack the president. Could have told you that.
And it seems like that number made Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell suddenly say, oh, we should agree on the next round of spending. This is coming soon, isn't it?
Nancy Pelosi earlier this week, Chuck, was ready to start talking about infrastructure projects, jobs bills, essentially, the next phase of this. It only took 24 to 36 hours for her to suddenly turn around and say, you know what? Actually, we are still in the emergency relief phase of this. And I think you are going to see Congress try to act as quickly as possible in that vein.
Yeah, and it almost will be like a refill the coffers of what was promised with the first round, which we're still trying to get out. Those small business loans, unemployment. All week long, you're going to see a lot of technical problems on that front. I hope folks are patient on there. I got to leave it there. Thank you guys for our shortened panel coming up. Author Michael Lewis on finding some creative ways to fight the pandemic. But first, the scene at Jefferson Hospital in Philadelphia, where healthcare workers had a message for all of us, and they tried to do it with a smile. Stick around.
Stay home, Chuck.
Over 1,000 60-plus-year-old people for every one ICU bed. The rest of the country would seem to be doing somewhat better, with one ICU bed for over 900 people. Good news, perhaps, but that's where the good news ends. Check this out. Only 47% of all U.S. counties have any ICU beds at all, and only 29% of U.S. counties have 10 or more. There are 536 counties in the United States where 30% of the population in those counties is over the age of 60. And of those, only 23% have any ICU beds at all. You see where this is going. In counties we call aging farmlands, the most remote counties in the country, the numbers are even more dire. There are 161 of those remote counties. In all 161 counties, there are only 6 ICU beds total. Up until now, we don't know how COVID-19 spreads in very rural environments where vast spaces make social distancing easier, or a way of life in some cases. But even as most eyes have been on New York City recently, the virus has been spreading outside of that metro area. 2 weeks ago, there were fewer than 800 counties with a confirmed case of the virus. This week, there were 2,300 counties with at least one case. When we come back, are there ways to fight the coronavirus that we're not yet thinking of? Author Michael Lewis joins us next. Lewis has spent a career chronicling people who find creative ways to identify and solve problems. In his latest book, The Fifth Risk, Lewis essentially describes what happened when, in his view, the Trump administration dumbed down government too much to function properly. So is the Trump administration prepared to take all of this on during this current crisis? Michael Lewis joins me now, social distancing from Berkeley, California. Mr. Lewis, welcome to Meet the Press. Long time, first time as far as I'm concerned, so I'm glad to have you on.
Good to see you, Chuck.
Let me just start with the premise of your book, which you were looking at the transition. And I want to connect some dots here. I'm going to put up a screen grab here of all the people that have been in charge of the Department of Homeland Security in the Trump administration. 5 different people.
This is our
2 of the
attack
Senate
of
confirmed,
the Trump
3
administration,
actings, including the situation
which happens
here.
every
It
Sunday.
feels as if, I know DHS wasn't a part of your book, but that amount, is that the definition of the 5th risk here sometimes, personnel?
You know, the book, the starting point for the book is if you really have to think about the federal government as this, as a manager of a portfolio of risks, right? And many of them are catastrophic, and you don't know what you're going to have to deal with, but you know there are people in there who are dealing with it. And what caught my eye, and the reason I wrote the book, was that we had this process to hand over the government. And it was actually, by law, the Obama administration was required to spend a great deal of time preparing to hand the government over to whoever succeeded it. And
He was too busy trying to
Obama
keep
took it
Trump
really
from winning
seriously because
with
he
a
realized
crooked
because Bush
FBI,
had done
FBI
so well to him, he
and
thought.
Justice
And
Department.
Trump, on his side, had built this enterprise of 500 people to roll into the Department of Homeland Security or the Department of Agriculture or wherever,
Right.
and he fired it the day after the election. So the transition never happened. So there was like this, that's the beginning of this whole story. It's the beginning of our response to the pandemic. It's the knowledge of how you dealt with, I don't know, say an Ebola outbreak was never actually transferred to the Trump administration. And I think that if you're going to tell, when people look back and tell the story of this crisis, they'll start there.
Right, because it was a
There's no
swamp
doubt they will.
from
Look, I wanna
Obama
pivot a
and
little
Biden.
bit. You just did a podcast and you noted we're going to learn a lot about our society during this
A
pandemic.
corrupt
And it's
bureaucracy.
probably going to surface problems we didn't know we needed to solve. What are a few that you're seeing now that you think we need to be keeping an eye on?
Are you talking about like risks we should be terrified of? You know, well, look, this in some ways was not the 5th risk in my mind, was the risk in that you weren't really it didn't have top of mind. And I came to the idea because I walked into the Department of Energy and got the briefing from the chief risk officer that the Trump administration had not bothered to get. And I asked, like, what are the top 5 things you're worried about just in the Department of Energy? And he said, look, there are a lot of really smart people dealing with things like, 1, preventing a nuclear weapon from going off when it shouldn't go off. 2, preventing the electric grid from going down or coming under attack. 3, North Korea getting a weapon that they can actually deliver to the West Coast. And it was like one thing after another, and there were steps being taken to prevent these bad things from happening. Now the question is, across an administration that's being run by a person who is largely indifferent to it, to what extent is this portfolio of risks, like more likely to happen? And the thing that worried me, and the thing that got me interested in writing the book in the first place,
Right.
was like, if something actually happens, I don't know what it is, what's going to happen, but when it happens, they're not going to be prepared to deal with it. And now we know what happened. So we're now in the land of second best solutions because we had someone who neglected the instrument, the tool
Right.
for dealing with the crisis.
Look, we're gonna end up having something will change in our society based on this. One of the things that I've wondered about is we're learning who's essential. We're finding out the truck driver's a lot more essential than some of us. The person who stocks the shelves a lot more essential. Do you see a reckoning on the economic front that sort of rights those wrongs in time?
You know, the first thing that might come out of this is an appreciation of the federal government, of what it does. Its basic job is to keep us safe. And if we don't pay attention to how it's run, we will find ourselves in this situation all over again. So I think that's the big thing. I think that's the thing comes out.
All right.
And that's why we elected
I guess
Donald
I gotta
Trump
leave it there.
to straighten out those things, and he is doing it.
Find a way to get more time with you down the road. Thank you, and thank you to all of you who have been watching today. Please continue to practice that social distancing, doing everything you can to keep your family and neighbors safe. The sooner we do it, the sooner we'll get through this. We'll be back next week, because if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
Shameful. He couldn't say anything positive about the president if they even ordered him to.